I type up my notes on Fridays, and they're anything. I may be looking at you, but I'm thinking of Saskatchewan. I may have just finished a meal, but I'm not writing about the food. Often, given who I am, they're one-liners, clever comebacks that I never get a chance to use in real life. So I decided to put them all in here, in a piece called Returns, which I will poison you against it ahead of time. Smacks a bit too much of smart-ass comments coming right back at you. But I had fun. It's called Returns. The Bar None in Bend, Idaho, has a welcoming committee of one drunk blonde named Elma, smarter than you think, who works on her comeback lines the way some women work on their nails. She is one of those so young, so old faces, and legs long enough to trap any man into conversation. Living out my days, that's not enough, she remarks to the bartender, whose function in this piece is to be dead. In walks a guy named Rob, who looks as if he specializes in the science of drab, brown soup. He's the only customer in the bar besides Elma, leaving her little choice. After a few minutes, she exhales a smoke ring that drifts over to his G&T. I live a life of unrequited loathing. He shakes his head, lightly ensnared in her smoke. I don't want to be the beneficiary of your guilt. She frowns at him. Welcome to Nevermind Land. Then bares her armpits in a healthy, breast-lifting stretch, excuse me. That's an interesting slip. You look so uninteresting, it's interesting. Some people have a pet goldfish. You probably have a pet peeve. Go ahead. He waves the smoke away as if it were tentacular. Summarize me. Okay. She welcomes the invitation. You have the cheapest dreams. They kill the dwarves in my mind. You prefer forgetting to forgiving. Please, he says, in a non-pleasing manner. If that's your hum, where's the dinger? Elma looks at him more closely. Her patented 1, 2, 3 flinch routine isn't working. Decides to regroup. Could I have another parasol for my drink? She asks the dead bartender. Mine's wilted. Turns back to the new guy. So, what were you saying? What? That's a big what. So what? She sneers. Wouldn't it be great if it were great? Like all males, he misinterprets it, grins out of context, and leans toward her. Why didn't you say so? Insert me into slot A. You've got to be kidding. She extinguishes her cigarette in his drink. 300 years later, the answer would still be no. Sure, he decides to save face. Know what? Making love to you would be like climbing Mount Improbability. Here's some middle-aged wisdom. She crosses her legs like a scissors. Settle for less. Maybe. What I don't have, I've got plenty of. So I see. She decides to turn the tables, but settles for the bar stool. Okay, your turn. You're allowed 1.5 questions. All right, here's a Zen koan. What's the taste of a tuna fish sandwich you didn't eat? A smile. Something fishy about that. Deduct 2 points. Her eyes widen. No fair. Fuck you. A pause. Another pause. I could make an issue of it, but that would make it issue number 327, and I've got to move on. She checks her watch, which was stolen yesterday. One more try for him. What about sex? Now you see it. Now you still sort of see it if you half squint in the right direction. Too difficult. I'm into rot these days. You remind me of my ex. She blows another smoke ring, or would, if her cigarette hadn't recently drowned in his drink. If you can't snipe at your husband, who can you snipe at? He purses his lips. Tell me one secret thing. I put my feet on the table just to irritate my mother, though she died 5 years ago. I'm often homesick for homes I never knew. That's 2. So it is. How about advice? Want some? Like what? Never provide an alibi for a crime you haven't yet committed. Now maybe you should leave. He ponders this for a moment. Thinks about what any conversation will be like without her. He can say nothing. After a pause as patchy as a quilt, he covers up with 5 words. I think I love you. And that ruins everything. And that's the end of that. This is in here too. In fact, the collection is a bit of a patchwork. It's got longer stories, which I haven't read, more traditional, ones that I hope sort of get in under your skin. Nina, you're looking terribly upset.
I'm thinking about the second story.
What Remains? Yeah. That did get published. Any event. The method of composition, as I say, of this one was like a patchwork quilt. I got a number of lines until I got a critical mass and tried to scotch tape them together into 2 characters. There are some other ones like that in here, and I hope that doesn't frighten you off. Any other questions or comments? Or
What do you think is the most traditional story in the collection?
Yeah, probably one called The Perfect Couple. Because of its pacing, the way it slowly extends its reach. But as always, it's Galef, so in this case, The Perfect Couple is about a couple who both get cancer, and because they're perfect narcissists, they both compete with each other dreadfully as to who's sicker and who's going to die first. I'm not sure that answers your question. Yeah.
Do you write several of these at the same time, or stay with one, finish it, and then go on?
I rarely write more than one story at a time, though I may be doing other projects at the time. Like I'm writing a story, and I'm also trying to do some translation or some literary criticism or just lecture notes. But what I do is, I can't go any further in this story. There's one story called The Adjuster, which is also quite traditional and longer, about a guy who just gets fed up with all the easy wisdom and aphorisms and sayings, and founds a magazine devoted to torpedoing all this kind of conventional wisdom. It's actually a little better than it sounds. And I couldn't get anywhere with it. I had the premise that, you know, phrases like, I don't know, is the truth universally acknowledged, you know, that a man in possession of a fortune must be one of a wife, sort of a bastardization of Jane Austen's opening. It is and it isn't true. Any saying you care to mention, like it's a wise monkey that knows its own parents or mother, it never rains but it pours, he would just rip into and say, well, it's best half true, and this is the situation depends on. He had that kind of irritating mind. Well, that's as far as I got. I had the setup. I had some choice sayings to rip into, and I stopped. I gave it a good shot. I mean, I will try butting my keyboard against it for weeks and weeks, and then it disappeared somewhere on my desk. 2 or 3 years later, in a dry spell, I took it out, and I knew how to end it. So while there are a couple of drafts that aren't going anywhere somewhere on my desk, I may be working on something else. And that's actually advice I give to anyone. Too many beginning writers, one, give up on stuff, but also they don't know how to put something aside. It's all they've got. And when they send it out, in the old days when people sent things out rather than uploading them, they'd wait by the mailbox, which is not a healthy piece of behavior. I've always used to send out stuff, and when something comes back, as it often does, send something else out. And I sometimes think that my writing career is a triumph of accumulation and for, you know, perseverance, because you just have to send stuff out. Although you should probably finish it before you send it out. Yeah.
Do you ever write any stories about your students?
Not that I'm aware of. And in fact, people still come up to me and say, here's a great situation, you should write about this. Or just the other day, a colleague of mine talking about some fatuous business at a department meeting said, you've got to write about this. Well, he's got to write about it. I don't have to. Inevitably, particularly in novels, I may use someone's mustache, someone else's limp, her habit of scratching her brow in a sort of recombinant, but that's about as far as I want to get. Unfortunately, people may notice that mustache and think that's me, or that's my limp, or whatever, or that's my Rolex watch. I can't help that, but I do try not to do that. That's why I think this has the same disclaimer that most books have. The characters and events in this book are fictitious. Any similarity to real persons, living or dead, is coincidental and not intended by the author. That's not true of all authors, by the way. Sometimes that's a damn lie. Other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. Please, slowly, as you slowly pass out, there's wine, there's cheese, there's crackers.